So I've got version 3 of the autounattend.xml file of UnattendedWinstall open on the screen here. And this was generated by Winhance, as you can see from this comment line here. And in this video, I want to take you through this file and show you how it works and how you can make changes to it or even add your own customizations or optimizations to it, so that in effect, it's then added to the Windows install that you'll do. And I get that this video is not going to be for everyone. This is going to be for people that understand code, that understand how PowerShell works, because in essence, it's just a PowerShell script that runs to apply all of these tweaks. And this video will probably not get a lot of views because it might go over some people's heads, but that's fine. I've still decided to create it for those people who will find it useful. And I'm going to try to explain everything to the best of my ability. And if you have any questions, you can just leave a comment down below this video, or you can even create an issue on the UnattendedWinstall GitHub page if you don't understand something or if you need something to be cleared up. Now, first of all, this is an autounattend.xml file. It's generated by Winhance since version 3 of UnattendedWinstall. I've made it so that there is a synergy between Winhance, which is my other project, and UnattendedWinstall. And by the way, you can generate your own custom XML file with Winhance with the exact settings that you want to have applied when you do a reinstall of Windows. And I've already made a video about that. You can go ahead and check it out. I'll link it down in the description below. But basically, you've got these different passes with these different commands. Now, first off, you're going to see things repeated 3 times. So if I select this block, this component block all the way down here, this component block is repeated 3 times with the exact same orders. But the reason why that is because the first component applies if you run this on a 32-bit version of Windows or a 32-bit ISO. Then if we go down, you'll see there's another block that applies to ARM64. And if we go down further, we'll see a block that applies to AMD64. But these blocks are all identical. Currently, it's just done this way so that a single answer file can be used regardless of what processor architecture it's running on. But in most cases, for most people, it's going to be AMD64. But the commands inside of each block is exactly the same. So if we look at this first component here, you've got the user data section, which specifies a product key for Windows. Now, currently, it's all set to zeros, which means it will prompt you to select a Windows edition, like Pro or Home, for example. But this doesn't always work because Microsoft changed the way things work on some of the latest ISOs of Windows 11. And basically what will happen on laptops most of the time is if there is an OEM key found on the BIOS of the laptop or the UEFI of the laptop, it's going to automatically just select that edition of Windows, which is usually Home or Home single language. And then you can't install the Pro edition of Windows, although you want the Pro edition of Windows. Now remember, this answer file doesn't activate Windows or anything like that. You still have to provide a valid Windows product key to activate Windows. But if there is a key in the UEFI or BIOS of your laptop motherboard, it's usually going to auto-activate with that key. That's just the way Microsoft designed it to work. Now, Microsoft does give you a way to explicitly specify a Windows version that you want to use. And you'll see if we look at order 7 to 11, there are actually commands that execute to prevent the auto detection of the Windows edition and then forces Windows Setup to show all of the available editions of Windows during the setup. Now, what this basically does is it creates the ei.config file and specifies that it shouldn't read an OEM key from the BIOS and show you all of the available options. But that doesn't work properly on some of the newer Windows ISO files anymore. But I've still included it for the old ISO files, which it does work on, like Windows 10, for example. Now, if we just scroll back up to the start of this component here, and we look at this product key, like I said, setting all of these to zeros should make it so that the Windows Edition screen is shown during the Windows setup process. I've also heard that completely removing this will also show it. I haven't tested that yet, but like I said, there is a way that you can actually force the edition that you want to have. Now, on one of the other general discussions on the Winhance page, someone asked this question. The question was, if I can force the version like Windows Pro on my laptop instead of it auto-installing home using the create ISO answer file. Now, like I explained here, yes, you can force it to install Pro, but you will need to edit the file manually. So you can open the file and then you can replace all of the 3 instances, which has those zeros in the key field, with this key. This is the Pro key. You can then save the auto unattend and then use the new file when installing Windows, and it will automatically install the Pro edition of Windows, and it won't read the key from the UEFI BIOS. Now, very important, the product key that's used there is not a product or license key that's valid for Windows activation. Those keys are only to select the edition of Windows to install during setup. They do not activate or license the installation. These keys are provided by Microsoft, which are generic RTM or KMS keys, and they're only used to specify the Windows version. You'll see on this GitHub page as well, it specifies a bunch of these keys. So, for example, if you wanted to force Windows 11 Home to be installed, you would use this key and you would provide that to the autounattend.xml file. If you wanted to install Windows Home single language, you would then use that key right there. And you can see the Windows Pro key that I provided in my response of this question. That is the same key, which will then install Windows 10 or 11 Pro. I know this says Windows 11, but that's basically because Windows 10 support has ended, but it's the exact same key to get the Windows edition installed. And then it'll install the Pro edition of Windows in this case, but once it's installed, you will have to provide a valid Windows 10 or 11 Pro product key for it to activate. It's not going to activate automatically. So that's how you can force this autounattend.xml file to install a specific edition of Windows. Now, if I scroll down here, you can see we've got some commands, and order 1 through 6 just basically skips the Windows 11 hardware requirement checks. So it doesn't do the TPM check, the secure boot check, the storage check, CPU, RAM, and disk check. And then below that, we've got those orders to prevent the auto detection of the Windows edition. So this pass was all in the Windows PE pass, or the Windows pre-installed environment. So that means the moment you see that screen where you can select your region and language and then continue with the installation, once you've booted from the ISO file, that is the Windows pre-installed environment, because nothing has actually been installed to your hard drive or SSD at that point in time. So now if we scroll down, we'll get to the next section, which is the specialize phase. And once again, you're going to see these components repeated. There is the 32-bit component, there's the ARM64 component, and then we've got the AMD64 component. So if I take you through all of these commands, there are basically 5 commands, and this is where most of the major stuff happens. So the way that the UnattendedWinstall or an answer file generated with Winhance works is the first order here will load scripts in this XML file. So it's scripts that's defined in the XML file. And in our case, it's the Winhancements PowerShell file that's going to be loaded, which we'll get to later on in the video. The second order here creates a registry entry to create a local account during the OOBE phase, so that you're not forced into a Microsoft account. Then the third order here is going to disable all of the network adapters temporarily, so Windows doesn't update during OOBE, and it's also going to help you to create a local account. The fourth order enables .NET Framework 3.5 from Windows Installation Media, because it's actually still contained on the Windows ISO, it's just not enabled. And this was something that someone requested I add to the answer file, so that's why I added it. And then the last order here runs the Winhance script system-wide operations, which will be the app uninstalls, the HKey local machine registry entries, and so on. And then it's basically just a PowerShell command that runs the Winhancements PowerShell file that I have defined here, which we'll get to later on. And this is basically where all of the deep loading, optimization, and customization happens. It happens in one singular file. It's not scattered into different orders. So if you wanted to change something, you can do it in the Winhancements file. So like I said earlier, this component runs in the specialize phase. Now, the specialize phase is when the Windows files have already been copied over to the hard drive or SSD, but no user account has been created yet. So that's why you'll see this order says it runs system-wide operations like app uninstalls and local machine registry entries. So basically it runs everything that doesn't require a user account to be created yet. The user account stuff runs later on, and it's actually defined in the Winhance script itself. It's not an order in the XML file. But once we get to that, I'll explain that all in more detail. Now, if we scroll down and we look at the next section, which is the OOBE system, there are some commands here that hides the EULA pages, the OEM screens, the online account screens, and it hides the wireless setup and basically sets your network location for you already. And then just after that, it's going to enable all of the network adapters after the OOBE completes. So this basically runs in the process where you can create a user account for yourself. This is where all of these commands run. And once again, this is repeated 3 times for 32-bit, ARM64, and then AMD64, which means 64-bit. We've got some extra script, which basically then creates the scripts directory, so we can copy the Winhance's PowerShell file into that directory. Now, here is where the Winhance's file content is defined. So it's defined inside of CData brackets. CData is basically a way that you can just wrap other code inside of a XML file. That's the simplest way that I can explain it. So everything from this arrow here, all the way down in the script file to the last write log entry file, if I select that and I copy it and I basically open it in a text editor or a code editor rather, and I paste it in there, you're going to see it detects this as a PowerShell file. That is a PowerShell icon that you can see up there, because this is essentially one big PowerShell file that contains all of the settings that we want to have applied. So that's the way this works. The autounattend.xml file basically just executes this PowerShell file that was created by Winhance, which contains all of our app removals and settings and so on. So in essence, you can basically copy that entire content like I did now. You can save it as a PowerShell file and then run this Winhance script, and it's going to apply most of the stuff that's contained in it, because it is primarily designed to be run inside of a Windows installation environment. So some of the stuff might not apply properly, like the start menu layouts and that type of thing, but 90 to 95% of the stuff is going to be applied the exact same way. But let's get back to the file on GitHub so I can show you from the top here just the structure of this file. And I try to make the code self-documenting or self-explanatory when you look at the code. So let's read the synopsis and stuff here so you can understand how this works. So this file is the Winhance Windows 10 or 11 customization and optimization script. It applies registry settings, Windows app removals, optimizations and customizations based on the Windows version. It requires admin privileges. It's compatible with Windows 10 and Windows 11, and it logs all of the activities to the log file in that location. Now it also has a parameter, which is called user customizations. So when the parameter is specified, it's going to apply only the user specific registry settings. So this is what happens after Windows has been installed and a user account has been created. When it's not specified, it's going to apply all of the settings except HKey current user entries. And then the user customizations are tracked and will only apply once per user. So once it's already applied for that user account, it creates this registry entry in the HKey current user key, which says the user customizations have been applied. And if you want to apply it again for that same user, then you'll have to delete this registry key and then it'll run again. But generally, it's only going to be needed to run once for every user that's created. So if you just run the file normally, it's going to apply all the system-wide settings, the HKey local machine registry settings, and the app removals. And if you run it with the user customizations parameter included, then it's going to run in user mode, and it's only going to apply the user specific settings. Then we've got some helper functions and stuff. We've got the logging setup, so it can write all of the stuff to a log file. We've got functions to get the target user, the user's SID. Then I've got a bunch of custom functions to remove registry values, remove registry keys, create new registry keys, set binary bits, because some of these registry keys require a binary bit execution and not just normal dword or string values. We've got a function to set the binary bit, and these are all helper functions to properly set the registry keys the way they're supposed to be set. Obviously, PowerShell has its own native commandlets for manipulating the registry, but in this way, I can also log all of the entries and stuff really easily. So that's why all of those helper functions exist. Then we get to the main execution. So if it's not running in the user customizations mode, basically the system-wide mode, it's going to create the scripts directory, and it's going to start with the Windows apps removal. So we've got 3 Windows app removal scripts by default. It's going to be the bloat removal PS1 file, and then later on we'll get to the edge removal as well as the OneDrive removal, because they have their own dedicated scripts because they need it. But basically what happens here is we also define the entire bloat removal script inside of this code block here. You can read through the same synopsis there like I did in the main enhancements file. But the way this file works is it sets some aliases for the appx package removal. So it works on Windows 10 and Windows 11. Then it defines a list of all of the packages, the Windows apps that it wants to remove or that it's going to remove. It defines all of the capabilities and then the optional features. And then if there's an app that requires special removal, like OneNote, for example, it'll put it in the special apps section there. Then it's going to start with the removal. And if anything fails, it's going to do a max retries of 3. So first off, it's going to try and remove all of the appx packages, the Windows packages, and it's going to remove both the normal appx package and the provisioned appx package. So it's basically going to remove it for any existing users, if existing users are created already, and it's also going to remove it for any new users that might be created. Then after that, it's going to process the capabilities, processing the optional features and any of the special apps. It's going to log all of that to the bloat removal log file as well. And then at the bottom here, there is also a block for registry settings to prevent issues and bugs. And this is basically for the Xbox app. Sometimes you get a pop-up that says you need an app to open the overlay, and these registry entries are just added so that that doesn't happen. And then at the end here, this is where the content for the bloat removal file stops. Then the Winhance script will set the content of this bloat removal file, and it'll then be saved on the drive, on the hard drive or SSD. The exact same thing is going to happen with the edge removal and the OneDrive removal. So this is where the edge removal content starts. It removes both the legacy and Chromium versions. It's based on work by other people, and I do give them credit in the file itself. But in essence, it's going to create the entire edge removal file, also save it on the SSD or hard drive, and then I'm going to show you exactly when it's executed. So this is the end of the edge removal file. It's then also going to put it in the edge removal path. Like I said, it's going to save it on the SSD or hard drive where Windows is installed. And then you've got the exact same thing for the OneDrive removal content. It's a dedicated script to remove OneDrive and prevent it from reinstalling. So here is the end of the OneDrive removal script. So it's also then going to join the path and put it on the drive. And then here it's going to execute the removal scripts and register their scheduled tasks. So the way UnattendedWinstall and Winhance works is it's not just a one-time removal of the apps, it's actually a continuous removal via the task scheduler in Windows, and then it executes these scripts. So these scripts are designed in such a way that it first checks if there's anything to remove. If there's nothing to remove, it just executes. So for example, in the Microsoft Edge script, once the scheduled task runs and it calls the script to remove Edge, it's not just going to go ahead and try and uninstall Edge. It's first going to check, listen, is Edge actually installed at the moment? If it's not, it's just going to exit so that it doesn't run when it's not needed. But if it does detect that Edge is installed, then it'll go ahead and uninstall it. If you don't want that to happen, you can either delete the scheduled tasks using Winhance, or you can just delete it in the task scheduler yourself. Then I've got another block here, which just sets the install PowerShell file, which is basically the file that's executed once you install Windows. There will be a install Winhance desktop shortcut, because you don't have any way of getting any apps on your computer, and Winhance provides you the ability to do that, because if Edge is removed and everything is removed, you won't be able to install anything without a program like Winhance, unless you know how to use Winget and how to get Winget installed. And then you can also use it that way, and any other package managers for that matter. So it'll then just always download the latest version of Winhance and install that to your computer, and then you can use it to install any of the software that you need. So that's it basically for the Windows app removal process. And then next we'll have a look at the settings. Now the settings also have their own blocks. You've got the power plan and power config settings, which basically sets up the power plan for you. And this is set up based on what power plan you had selected in Winhance. So even if you have a custom power plan that you created, you'll see if you use Winhance, it's going to detect that custom power plan, and you'll be able to export it into the autounattend.xml file too, and it'll end up on the new Windows installation. But it basically creates it from one of the existing schemes and just sets the name of that plan to the one you had. Then it applies the other advanced power settings. It enables some of the hidden power settings, the CPU hidden power settings, and then it goes and applies all of the advanced power settings based on what you had selected in Winhance when the file was created. So you can see it has AC values and DC values, and then it has a description here of what the setting does, what setting controls it, and then you've got the GUIDs for the different settings here. So you have full control over editing the file here as well, but that's the way it gets into Winhance, and then it applies all of the settings and sets the power plan as active. Then you've basically just got a bunch of registry entries. So this is the gaming and performance section, which all apply to the HKey local machine registry hive, and every single one of these has a description, and it's the exact same description that it has in Winhance. So you can read through every single one if you need to. If we then scroll down, we'll get to the scheduled tasks section, and the scheduled tasks will then be enabled or disabled based on what you selected on Winhance, and it's executed in the block down here. Then we've got the notification settings, additional power settings that's related to the registry only. That's not related to the power config commands that we had at the top. We've got privacy and security settings, sound settings, and then Windows update settings. There's also a section for Explorer settings that can be applied system-wide. So for example, this is applied to the HKey class's root key. And what this section does is it adds a take ownership entry to the context menu so that you can quickly take ownership of any files or folders in Windows. So it basically sets the registry content, and then it creates a temporary file, it imports that file, and then it just deletes the temporary file. The same thing happens with this block down here, which basically puts reg content to add a entry to the context menu where you can show or hide the file extensions in Windows. And this is something that someone also requested that I add, and that is why it's added. And then there's another one here to enable the photo viewer. Now, although it's called enable photo viewer, in this case, in this file, it's not enabled. You'll see it has a minus in front of these registry keys. And if it has a minus like that, it means it's actually removing that key. It's not adding it. But if you were to set the option in Winhance to enable the Windows Photo Viewer, then it'll just change the script to enable the Windows Photo Viewer in Windows. And it does the same thing. It creates a temporary registry file, then just imports it and then deletes it. Then there are some other Explorer related settings here. We've got start menu settings, taskbar settings, and then there's a start menu layout, which is applied based on whether you have Windows 11 or Windows 10, because they work differently. But that's the way that the start menu is cleaned. And then it's going to register the user customizations scheduled task. So this will run the Winhancements file but with the user customizations parameter included. So this is going to run in a system context, but for any new user that's created, it's only going to run once, and then it won't run again unless that registry key is deleted that I mentioned earlier in the video. Now, before it starts with the user customizations, I've also added a block here where you can add your system-wide PowerShell script contents below. You can see there's a comment to start here and end here. So you can basically click inside of that, and then you can add any valid PowerShell code that you add to this file. If it's not valid PowerShell code, it's not going to execute the script and nothing is going to be applied. So you have to know what you're doing when you add this code. I'm not going to provide support for custom code that you add to the file. You will need to ensure that the code that you add is valid PowerShell code. But after that, it gets to the user customizations section. So what it will do here is, because it runs in the system context, it can't just apply the HKey current user keys to the system profile, because it's not going to have any effect on the actual user account. So it first detects which user is logged in. Then once it gets the logged in user, it creates a new PS drive, which is basically just a HKey user's key with the target user's SID or SID. Then it sets up that thing to check if the user customizations have been applied or not. If it's not been applied yet, then it's going to start applying it, and it basically applies all of the gaming and performance settings that's related to the current user. As you can see, it's HKey current user entries. All of the notification settings, privacy and security settings, sound settings, Windows update settings, and then Explorer settings. And then at the bottom here, you've got the start menu settings, taskbar settings, and then Windows theme settings. Then at the end here, it's going to apply the wallpaper based on the Windows version and theme. So if you've got dark mode enabled, it's going to apply the dark mode wallpaper. If you've got light mode enabled, it's going to apply the light mode wallpaper. This is for Windows 11. On Windows 10, there is just one wallpaper for both light and dark mode. So it will then just apply that wallpaper. And then you'll see there's also a section where you can add your specific user PowerShell script contents below. So if you add any HKey current user entries here that you want to add, you can add them here, or any PowerShell script contents that you want to be run for the user specifically, for any new user that you create one time, the first time that it logs in, then you can add it to this block under the user specific PowerShell script contents. And like I said before, this has to be valid PowerShell script contents. You have to ensure that. I'm not going to provide any assistance or help with PowerShell code that's not working. So then it's going to go ahead and apply that. And once it's applied, it'll then reboot the system, so all of that can take effect. And then once you load into Windows, you'll see that all of the settings have been applied. Now, what you can do is you can also go to this directory where the script file is. So it logs it to C program data, Winhance, unattend logs, and then winhancements.txt. So you can open that log file and you can look through it, and you'll see whether anything errored out and if something wasn't applied, and basically just what exactly happened and what was applied to the system. But all the way at the bottom here, you'll then see a log entry which says the Winhance Windows optimization and customization script has completed successfully, and that is then the end of the script. So I hope this walkthrough video of the autounattend.xml file was useful to you. Like I said at the start of the video, I know this is going to go over some people's heads, but I created it for those people who want to understand better and that has the knowledge or interest to understand it better. But with that being said, I've also created other in-depth guides on Winhance and the new UnattendedWinstall update. If you want to have a look at those, I'll leave them linked at the end of this video and you can check them out, and I'll talk to all of you guys soon.